Dark Souls
2. Originally released in 2014, I think it's fair to say that Dark Souls 2 is easily the most divisive Souls game. The game went through development hell without Hidetaka Miyazaki, which led to a clearly half-finished game, at least in terms of ideas in the world. While this is nothing new for the Souls games, Dark Souls 2 felt so much more broad in its unfinishedness. In Demon Souls, there was only one missing level, the Northern Limits. In Dark Souls, half of the game was unfinished, but only Lost Izalith and arguably the Demon Ruins really felt unfinished. The other levels just felt somewhat rushed. In Dark Souls 2, the world was clearly put together in a way that barely made sense, elevators taking you up to places that shouldn't exist based on what you've seen, a weird, somewhat unfinished and chopped up story, and a graphics engine that was cut down hard after what was shown in early trailers. If you want to know more, I'll link some videos in the description that do a good job of showing and or explaining the development of Dark Souls 2 and what was cut and or changed. But not only was Dark Souls 2 more unfinished than the other games in the series, it made a lot of changes in terms of world structure and combat. The world was no longer interconnected like Dark Souls, instead having a more hub-like structure somewhat similar to Demon Souls, with different paths sprawling out from a main hub. The combat was changed. Attacks use up more stamina, poise was changed, and rolling was different from Demon Souls and Dark Souls. It was a slew of changes that riled up many fans, many that didn't want or didn't like the change in a formula that they thought worked. But I'm quite the opposite. I wasn't a diehard fan or veteran of the Souls games when Dark Souls 2 came out. In fact, Dark Souls 2 was my first Souls game, so I really didn't have any prior conceptions as to what a Souls game should be when I went into it. And I came out of the game really loving it, and I went on to play all the other Souls games and Sekiro. Please, Sony, bring Bloodborne to the PC. I played like 10 hours of PS now and had a lot of fun, please. I really want to play it again. You make a lot more money. Why haven't you done it yet? But I like to think that I'm not completely nostalgia blind. I know of the game's shortcomings and could rattle them off for hours, but I think the game overall is much better than people give it credit for. Change isn't always bad, and I think most of the changes in Dark Souls 2 are pretty solid. Death is a constant in the Souls games. It's a punishment for failure. You lose progress in the level you're in, and you also lose your soul's progress towards leveling up. And on top of that, there's usually a third loss of some kind. Up to this point in the series, there have only been 2 of these third types of losses. In Demon Souls, you get forced into soul form, where you lose half of your health. In Dark Souls, you lose your soft humanity. Demon Souls felt far too punishing with death. The player wasn't allowed to learn from their mistakes because they generally had no health to make mistakes with. Sure, having half health incentivizes players to be more cautious, but being cautious can only get you so far. There was the Cling Ring, which softened the percentage to only 25% health lost, but that took up a ring slot, which could make you think about if you actually want to give up said ring slot for the Cling Ring or some other ring. While not a bad system, it felt more like an annoyance than anything else because of the small ring pool in Demon Souls and only 2 ring slots. Meaning if you had 2 rings that were paramount to your build or your situation, mage, over-encumbered, in the damn swamp, etc., it can be super annoying to swap out one of your rings for the Cling Ring. In Dark Souls, death really wasn't much of an issue. Soft humanity was nice to have, sure, they gave you extra defense, but losing your souls felt more impactful than losing your soft humanity. So neither system was perfect, but personally, I prefer Demon Souls system, at least on paper. But when Dark Souls 2 launched, we got what I believe is the best third punishment type in a Souls game to date. When you died, you lost your health, like in Demon Souls, but instead of losing half of your health all at once, you lost a percentage of it over time until you were at half health. And this loss could be further mitigated with the Ring of Binding. This new take on an old system still made death punishing, like in Demon Souls, but it still allowed for players to make mistakes and learn, because they had more health to play with. And with the introduction of 4 ring slots and a boatload more rings, choosing to use the Ring of Binding felt more impactful. Or at least, it didn't feel like an annoyance. A small point, sure, but I believe it's one of the best small changes Dark Souls 2 made, making the game more player-friendly while still keeping a nice challenge. The world in Dark Souls 2 is a right mess. The levels often fit together in ways that don't make sense, levels are barely telegraphed, and the perspective of things isn't always consistent. But the individual levels are wonderful. Not perfect by any means, but still wonderful. In stark contrast to Demon Souls, and Dark Souls to an extent, the critical path of most levels are much shorter in Dark Souls 2, allowing the speedy or unexplorative players to generally make it through the level within minutes. And instead of items having a relatively even split of being spread across the critical and non-critical path, most items this time are on the non-critical path, in their own little bubbles of explorable areas. Take, for example, Huntsman's Copse. You can run through the entire area picking up only a small handful of items, maybe the key to the undead lockaway bonfire, or the item that's behind the undead thief on the little outcropping under the bridge. But most of the items you have to go out of your way to get. Some items that are in a cave that you have to drop down to, the items scattered on the edge of the forest, and even the path to the undead purgatory. Now, I'm not saying Dark Souls 2 is the only game to do this, or even that the optional content, mainly the optional areas, is even the best in the Souls series. Dark Souls famously did this with the Great Hollow, the return trip to the Undead Asylum, the Painted World of Ariamis, and of course, Ash Lake. And honestly, all of those levels are better than pretty much any optional area in Dark Souls 2. Belfry Luna has an ass boss, the path to the Undead Purgatory sucks, and the boss isn't that much better. The Dark Chasms of Old suck, and all of the multiplayer areas and the DLCs are hell. You get the picture. Honestly, the only good optional areas that I can think of are No Man's Wharf and the Cathedral of Blue, and that's mostly because of how they look. I just like how Dark Souls 2 often handled its optional content. You don't have to go ridiculously far out of your way just to do it, like the Painted World. It allows for anyone to experience the optional content, but only if they decide to take a step off the beaten path, rather than basically needing a guide or a message online telling them what to do. And speaking of going off the beaten path, sorta, while the world may be messy in its construction, Dark Souls 2 is a very freeform game. With the right planning and skill, a player's very first boss could be Ava in the Crown of the Ever King DLC. And while the previous Souls games had their non-linearity, they were somewhat limited by certain aspects of the world design or level design. Demon Souls has 5 wholly disconnected levels, which works perfectly for Demon Souls, because this allows players to take on whatever world they want depending on their mood, skill level, or whatever. But a player always has to do the first level of Boletarian Palace before getting access to the rest of the levels, and there's only so much non-linearity that can be squeezed out of 5 levels. Dark Souls has a world that's interconnected, and its non-linearity comes from keys allowing access to pieces of the world that allow for non-linearity, for lack of a better way to put it. And while this really helps with making the world feel the way it does, not every piece of the world connects with the other pieces to allow for non-linearity. Take the Catacombs versus the Undead Parish. The Undead Parish links up with Darkroot Garden, Sin's Fortress, and Firelink Shrine, all of which lead into other areas. The Catacombs only link up with the Tomb of the Giants and Firelink Shrine, with only the latter level leading to other areas. And most areas are locked up from early access by scripted events, mainly the opening of Sin's Fortress, or by keys, with the Master Key being one of the only ways to unlock those areas early without glitches. And of course, there are the Golden Fog Gates that prevent access to most late-game areas, further limiting non-linearity. Dark Souls 2 is a mesh between the previous games. Its world design more reflects Demon Souls, with the hub leading to different areas, but this time almost every piece is connected, meaning there are very few loading screens like in Dark Souls. And Dark Souls 2 borrows from Dark Souls' progression gate idea, but changes it to make the game more freeform. There's one major progression gate in Dark Souls 2, the Shrine of Winter, which needs either the 4 Embraced Great Souls or the player to have 1 million soul memory to open. Other progression gates are the 3 King's Doors, which need the King's Ring to be opened, or the Fragrant Branch of Yore, which is only needed once to beat the game, and many can be found across Drangleic. With enough patience, skill, and knowledge, you can do all sorts of non-linearity shenanigans in Dark Souls 2. It's arguably the most open Souls game without glitches, granting the game a massive replayability boon. The level variety and length in Dark Souls 2 is wonderful. Once again, not perfect by any means, but still, it's wonderful. In Demon's Souls, there wasn't a whole lot of level variety because there was only 8 levels, but this was totally fine because the 5 main levels were pretty long, allowing for there to be a decent amount of sub-level variety, which led to a deeper understanding of each level. In the Boletarian Palace, you can find little training areas for the knights and guards, sleeping and eating quarters, little areas in which people may or do live. And the Stonefang tunnels, you go through mines, see where minerals are filtered. You get the idea. But when Dark Souls came out, the level count roughly tripled. 21 levels, not including the DLC. But with that level count, and most of the levels needing to be interconnected, the levels became shorter. Now, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but I find most of the levels in Dark Souls, mainly the ones in the latter half of the game, to be a weird, unsatisfying length. The best example I can think of for this is Anor Londo. You show up, travel along the rafters of a big building that holds only a painting, then make your way inside a different building, where you spend most of your time trekking up and down stairs through bedrooms and shit before fighting over Sihn and Smo. It's a fun level, sure, but the length just doesn't feel quite right. Moving on from that tangent, I feel Dark Souls 2 got the short level length just right. The levels are much shorter, probably because the level count is now 36, not including the DLCs. Although, to be fair, I wouldn't call some of these levels, but I digress. These shorter levels allow for the player to run through them quickly if they know what they're doing, the more consistent dishing out of ideas and content, and they also allow for more variety, like a noxious mine, a mining town ravaged by a spider curse, or a castle sunken in lava. The levels take an almost Super Mario Galaxy approach to them, which tends to put function over form. Of course, in a cartoony version of space, this can be far more forgiving with realism and believability. But when your game is set in a high fantasy version of Earth, it's harder to ignore. Take, for example, Drangleic Castle. The central themes of the level are stone enemies coming to life and activating locks with the souls of enemies. You run up the staircase to the castle, get ambushed by Macedonian soldiers that come to life, and usually pull them away from the archers to better deal with them. And once you get back up to the main entrance, you find that it's locked. And after killing the archers near the golems, you discover, hopefully, that they absorb enemy souls to open nearby things. And these two ideas are carried out through most of the level. Next time you see these ideas, the same basic principle is used, but on a much larger scale, with 6 doors to open that are guarded by stone soldiers, with 90% of the doors having a ruined sentinel behind them. And the last time you see this mechanic, at least in the base game, you're put into a small room filled with stone soldiers and a singular golem that needs activating. This makes zero sense for a castle. It could be argued that having a door that only opens from fallen enemies could be an advantage in a siege, but multiple doors throughout the level and an elevator? It's fine level design, but good golly, it makes no damn sense. And yeah, sure, it's not exactly like Mario Galaxy. The order in which these scenarios appear in probably isn't how Nintendo would have done it, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to get at. Demon's Souls is more like Super Mario Sunshine, usually putting form over function to make a place that really feels, well, real. Isle Delfino, a tropical resort island, or the land of Boletaria, a high fantasy kingdom torn up by demons. While it can lead to some rough level design, like the mines of Stonefang tunnels stressing out the camera and just being annoying in terms of enemy encounters, it really helps with immersion. A nice medium between the two, Dark Souls is more like Super Mario 64, trying its hardest to balance out form and function. Most parts of a level are given some environmental reason for existing, which is nice, but it doesn't always work. Take the path of the bonfire Solaire is resting at in Anor Londo. Why does this thin buttress in the Cathedral of the Gods lead down to this tower? Why does it have tiny benches? And why does another buttress lead up to a lip on the side of the cathedral that allows me to drop down on a nearby balcony? As a piece of level design, it's pretty solid, given the enemy placement and such, but it only partially works in terms of making the world feel real. But to be fair, it really only starts to come apart when you question it. And as for the theming, not every theme is unique, new, or even done perfectly. While I love Drangleic Castle, with its moody weather and isolating atmosphere, it is absolutely beaten by Boletarian Palace and Anor Londo, both areas which feel like an actual castle, or cathedral in Anor Londo's case, whereas Drangleic Castle feels more like a video game level, because Demon's Souls puts form over function, whereas Dark Souls 2 tends to put function over form, and Dark Souls being a nice middle ground. This feeling doesn't plague every level. The Shaded Woods, Doors of Pharos, Harvest Valley, the Grave of Saints, and Dragon Area/Shrine, I think are all good examples of levels that don't feel like levels, and instead feel like what they're trying to mimic. Dark Souls 2 excels at the more natural-looking areas, somewhat ironically. While the backdrops may not have the best-looking assets, the Shaded Woods and Forest of Fallen Giants are two areas people like to point their fingers at, the more natural levels still manage to feel like what they're trying to represent. Compare Darkroot Garden to the Shaded Woods. Darkroot Garden never felt right to me as a forest level, and I can't exactly place my finger on why. Maybe it's the texture work, the constant use of some variety of brown and green for the floors and the walls, and a beigeish color for the buildings, or maybe it's just how the level is laid out. I don't know, but I find the Shaded Woods to look and feel much better than Darkroot Garden. It feels much more like what it is, a forest grove with ruins dotted about, and the textures and lighting more properly feed into that. Maybe it has to do with Dark Souls 2's graphics engine, which might be better suited to places like the Shaded Woods and Majula. And a minor point, but not only does this larger level count make Drangleic feel bigger than Boletaria or Lordran, which both feel pretty small, but the skyboxes and the land surrounding the levels has been made larger, although at the expense of level telegraphing. But compared to both Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, I felt like I was going on a much larger, more isolating journey in this game than any of the others, passing through still villages, ruined forts, and ancient shrines just to find an answer to the curse. I don't know what the general consensus on the NPCs of Dark Souls 2 is, but I also really enjoy them. Benhart of Hugo, Lucatiel of Mira, Vengarl, Pate and Creighton, Magellan, fucking Ladder, Smith, Gilligan. I love Gilligan. He's such a greedy, snobby, useless character, and that's exactly why I love him. He has no real purpose for existing. His ladders only serve to mitigate some fall damage to get to places and items that the player can already reach. He's so goddamn useless, and I love it. As for other characters that are actually useful, I really like Magellan, and how he goes from a nervous, stuttering armor trader who's almost humble, to a greedy, snobby asshole who considers you nothing more than just a walking wallet full of souls, much like close companies. And Pate and Creighton are an interesting case study in trust. Creighton seems to be insane, but claims that Pate is a backstabber. He's even seen people just like Pate, even though Pate seems to be so trustworthy. I'll link a video down below that does a better job of explaining. But the stars of the show are Benhart, Vengarl, and Lucatiel. Benhart is a lovable warrior from Hugo, willing to lend his sword in 7 boss fights. I don't really know what else to say about him, I think he's just fun. And like Benhart, Vengarl is a warrior as well, at least his body is. Vengarl is a warrior from Feroza that got his head chopped off in a battle, yet his head and body go on living separately. Vengarl tells of his life as a mercenary, and how in hindsight, the life of battle was foolish, and he enjoys his new life in peace, solitude, and reminiscence. Lucatiel, on the other hand, is a more tragic soul, traveling in search of an answer to the curse much like you, but also for her brother. Over the course of the game, she slowly loses her memory and mind until she disappears after one final interaction in Aldea's Keep. She fears loss of memory, memories she has, memories of her, and who will remember her when she's gone. It's one of the few times we see a character go hollow over a period of time, and it's saddening to watch. Our character is usually disconnected from the undead curse. We can technically never go fully hollow. But here we see a character degraded in front of our very eyes, and the fears she feels from it. It's haunting. But my personal favorite character is the Emerald Herald, Shanalot. Her monotone voice speaking words of saddening comfort, juxtaposed with how she'll kick her feet in boredom as she watches the bonfire or the sea. And on the rare occasion, she'll sway her feet in an almost childlike manner. She's been guiding many undead to and through Drangleic, and you're nothing special, until you make it farther than any previous undead. Then, you're finally someone she can put her faith and trust into, telling you the truth about who she is and why you're here. Oh yeah, and Cromwell's voice is sexy.
Something seems to be bothering you. Yes, I can tell. It is written upon your face. You have doubts about something you did. I am Cromwell.
Combat was heavily changed from Demon Souls and Dark Souls to Dark Souls 2. Rolling, stamina, encumbrance, poise, heck, a lot of weapons had slight moveset changes. Now, from my understanding, the biggest problem people have with the combat of Dark Souls 2 is the introduction of two new stats, adaptability and agility. And, to be frank, yeah, adaptability and agility suck. They make no sense in an action RPG like Dark Souls, where a player's skill and intelligence are the deciding factors of victory instead of a stat. Stats are supposed to be a nice boon to make a fight slightly easier. If a player attacks and uses items at bad times, or times their rolls poorly, they should be punished. Adaptability and agility make it far too easy to get away with the last two, which isn't how combat in the Souls game should work. And the worst part about it is that FromSoft had a better system, the Revamped equip load system. In Demon Souls, there was only one breakpoint for an equip load as far as I'm aware, which was at 50%. That means you were either fast rolling or fat rolling, no in between. But in Dark Souls, this system was revamped to include 3 major breakpoints: fat roll, mid roll, and fast roll, with fast rolls having 4 mini breakpoints at 25%, 16.6%, 8.3%, and 0%. These numbers also apply to ninja flips. While the introduction of more breakpoints was nice, they were really only applicable to fast rolls. If a player is in mid-roll or fat-roll territory, they might as well just wear armor that is on the edge of the breakpoint above them, to maximize defense, unless they cared more about Fashion Souls than anything else. In Dark Souls 2, 15 major breakpoints were added, meaning that every piece of armor a player wore really counted. Sitting on a breakpoint to maximize defense is much harder because of how tight each breakpoint is, and this system works so much better because of how many armor sets there are in Dark Souls 2. It's a shame that these breakpoints only affect roll distance and stamina recovery, which doesn't diminish its importance. A farther roll distance can help prevent roll catches, and a less reduced stamina recovery can be the difference between life and death. But imagine all of the little iframe tiers that there could have been, really making the player think about what armor they wore. A long tangent, I know, but back to the topic at hand, I'm going to throw the wild card and say that adaptability is not the worst thing ever. Contrary to what many have said, you don't need to level up adaptability a bunch just to beat the game. For most of my playthrough, my adaptability was at 9 or below, giving me 85 to 88 agility, which is roughly equivalent to a fat roll in Dark Souls in terms of iframes. And it wasn't that bad. I just had to time my rolls better than usual. Very rarely did I feel like a death wasn't my fault because I had low agility. Usually it was because of weird or lingering hitboxes. I'll keep this one pretty brief. I don't think Dark Souls 2 was filled with bad hitboxes. There are only 3 places I've consistently had hitbox problems with, which are Seldora, the Frigid Outskirts, and the Giant Memories. The spiders, the spider men, the reindeers, and the giants have really stinky hitboxes, some of which seem to come out before the animation starts, or just exist in weird places compared to the animation. That's it. 3 areas. The rest of the game has pretty alright hitboxes, with the worst defenders generally being thrust attacks, because of lingering hitboxes, which means rolling into thrust attacks usually leads to taking damage. And grab attacks weren't that bad, the worst defender I found being a singular ogre in Aldea's Keep. But in the end, adaptability is still a poor choice in the grand scheme of things, making player skill less important compared to a stat. Aside from adaptability and agility, it's mostly little changes to the combat that most people don't like. Once again, at least to my understanding. For example, most attacks use up more stamina, making it harder to just R1 your way to victory. You have to time your attacks and rolls far more carefully, so as to not leave yourself without stamina for an opening or an attack that needs to be dodged. A small change that makes battles feel slower and more tactical. A similar small change is the roll. In Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, when locked onto an enemy, your character does a side roll when they roll to the left or to the right, always facing towards the enemy. In Dark Souls 2, when locked on, your character does a full frontal roll in the direction that your analog stick is pointing. Side note, omnidirectional rolling is wonderful, and it's great that Dark Souls 2 introduced it. Anyhow, most people seem to not like this system because it makes it a lot harder to attack when coming out of a roll. But I personally like it for that exact reason. You can't attack willy-nilly in Dark Souls 2. You have to time your attacks far more carefully, or suffer the consequences, and rolling further enforces that. And somewhat similar to rolling, weapons tend to carry more momentum with their attacks than they did in Demon's Souls or Dark Souls, so it can be a lot harder to successfully hit an opponent after an initial attack. I'm somewhat mixed on this. On one hand, it feeds into the tactical combat, and it makes sense that your character wouldn't be able to do a complete 180 with a massive great axe or a halberd to hit an opponent. But on the other, it can lead to pretty annoying moments where you constantly try to hit an enemy, but can't because of the momentum from a previous attack. Speaking of hitting enemies, ganks. I know this could fit into the level segment, but I think it fits here. I often see unfair ganks, or just ganks in general, leveraged as a criticism towards Dark Souls 2, and while I think it's somewhat valid, the multiplayer-only DLC areas in the Shrine of Amana spring to mind, I do believe it's overblown. Very rarely are you put into unfair gank situations in Dark Souls 2. A lot of weapons were slightly changed to better deal with ganks in certain conditions, and you can more often than not use the environment to your advantage. In a wide open area, use a weapon with a wide swing, like a claymore. In a hallway, bring a partisan. Need to heal? You can run away, try to find cover, get enemies stuck on cover, or find a place they can't reach you. I get that not everybody likes ganks, but I feel that Dark Souls 2 handled most of them reasonably well. Backstabs were changed, albeit very stinkily. Now for backstabs to work, your character needs to hit an enemy roughly in the back with a new animation for a backstab to trigger. And on paper, this is a really great idea, because it fixes the mostly broken backstabs of Demon's Souls and Dark Souls, which just required the player to be in the general region of an enemy's back to get a backstab. But the backstab in Dark Souls 2 just feels janky. You won't always get a backstab from hitting an enemy in the back, sometimes it'll only work from the sides, or just not at all. Which isn't entirely new in Dark Souls 2, sometimes backstabs won't trigger when they probably should in the previous 2 games, but it seems to be more common here. Great idea on paper, just with mixed execution. Weapons, armors, and rings in Dark Souls 2 were made more frail, encouraging players to carry multiples or backups of weapons and armors, always keep a couple repair powders on them, or wear the bracing knuckle ring, which fed back into the player caring about what rings they wore. Although, to be fair, this change was mostly undermined by the shorter level length and more frequent bonfires. A change I can't explain in full detail is Poise. In Dark Souls, the more poise you had, the less often you'd stagger, no matter what situation you were in. In Dark Souls 2, this system was slightly changed, so that if you're attacked while standing still, walking, or running, and you have enough poise to withstand the attack, you'd half stagger, reducing movement speed. Attacking with high poise is the same, however, and a poise system that I think was absent from Dark Souls, Hyper Poise or Hyper Armor, makes a return here after having a brief life in Demon Souls, which allowed the player to carry out certain attacks when they're attacked. Hyper Poise in Dark Souls 2 really only affects heavy weapons, which makes sense. It's a lot easier to stop a dagger mid-attack than a 15-foot long sword. Poise regeneration time was increased by 5 times, with Wikidot claiming that it would take roughly 20 seconds for poise to fully refill in most scenarios, whereas it would only take about 3 or 4 seconds in Dark Souls. And as for the breakpoint changes, I can't fully explain them here because they're too dense in detail. But I find most of these changes to be fine. It feels like FromSoft was trying to balance poise out because of how powerful it was in Dark Souls. Although I feel like they made poise recovery a bit too punishing, for the most part I think they succeeded. And while I didn't really use it for this playthrough, I really enjoy power stancing. I have a character that dual wields a longsword and a rapier, and it was really fun to swap between power stancing and normal dual wielding to parry and get in powerful attacks. I like the music in Dark Souls too. A lot of boss tracks try this more intimidating, spooky vibe, and I think it kinda works. Not always, of course, but I like the idea. You're in this massive, confusing foreign land, and I think that style of music can really set in a sense of isolation and fear. But no other song really emphasizes that more than the title track, Dark Souls 2. It's ominous, foreboding, yet somewhat sad and isolating. It really brings in how far away from familiarity you are and will be. Not every track is like this, some are more imposing and epic. The Burnt Ivory King, Sora Long, Sihn, and the Ancient Dragon come to mind as some of the more epic tracks. And of course, there's one of the comfiest tracks in the Soul series, Majula. It's sad, yet strangely comforting. Your one place of rest, a ruined town with NPCs dotted about to sell you wares, words of advice, or just reminders on how hopeless the world is. It's lovely. I also like the story and lore. While both were heavily gutted because of time constraints, I think we got a better story than that of Dark Souls or Demon Souls. You come to Drangleic without really knowing why, but it seems they're in search of an answer to the curse. You travel this massive land to find the king, who supposedly has the answer, but when you find him, he's long gone hollow, and there's nothing you can really do. Without the DLCs, your goal shifts to taking the throne, which may or may not hold the answer to the curse. And with the DLCs, your goal shifts to gaining the Lost Crowns, which may have the solution to the curse. And all the while, you're reminded that things have repeated many times. Your journey, the triumphs and mistakes of the kingdom, etc. There is a bit of dissonance with the story and what you do, but I like it overall. The story feels far more personal than the previous two Souls games, which are more about saving or restoring a land, with the second option to leave it in supposed ruin, both options having holes and gray areas due to hidden information and a purposeful lack of some information to make the decision more complex. And as for lore, I think it fits for Dark Souls 2. Drangleic is supposed to be massive and built on the ruins of many, many kingdoms, so it makes sense that the lore leaves a lot of holes and unanswerable questions. It's somewhat similar to what Sekiro did later on, with bits of Ashina so old that almost all information about him is gone. Compare this to Dark Souls. Lordran was old, yes, but the oldest point in history that we are aware of is the Age of Ancients, and the Age of Fire came after. There just hasn't been enough time for a lot of history to be lost. In fact, there's enough info for fans to piece together very compelling and somewhat full timelines for the game. And I'll link a couple of my favorite videos down below. It's a lot harder to do stuff like this for Dark Souls 2, and I like that. A very hot topic of debate, the graphics of Dark Souls 2. While most people can agree that what we got in the final product is a downgrade from early trailers, people are far more divided on whether they're actually good or not in the final product. Me? I like the graphics, mainly because of the art direction, texture work, and lighting, ironically the latter two being my two biggest complaints for the game. Dark Souls 2 looks the absolute best in bright areas. Majula, the Dragon Shrine / Airy, Broom Tower, Laleum Lois. I think all of these areas look great graphically, although that probably won't come across too well in video form because I had to record at a low resolution for storage reasons. It's mostly the inside of places that are stinky. The inside of the Earthen Peak and the inside of Iron Keep come to mind. Very stinky, repeating textures with usually meh lighting, which is a real shame because I really like the themes of these levels. But it is what it is, sadly. While I'm not that big into PvP, a lot of people seem to really like the PvP of Dark Souls 2. At least Scholar of the First Sin, I'd assume. What people don't like is soul memory, which I have no strong opinions on because, as has been stated, I'm not a PvP guy, but I'll link a video that explains soul memory. I only got invaded once in my entire playthrough, which is pretty impressive for the original Dark Souls 2. Although I really don't have anything other to say than I think it's fine. So yeah, that's all I've really got to say about Dark Souls 2. I really do think people give it more crap than it deserves, and it should get more recognition for the things it did right. But people continue to throw the name Dogshit 2 around whenever the game is mentioned, so it doesn't really matter what I say. Anyhow, enjoy this video? I'd be surprised if you did. Discuss in the comments what you did or didn't like about Dark Souls 2, and try to be civil. Doubt some will, but it's worth a shot, eh? And sorry if you couldn't understand what I said sometimes. I tend to slur my words, and it's hard for me not to.